So the big news right now, and I mean, there's a lot of news right now, but we're talking about the government shutdown, and there's a lot to be exposed with this shutdown. I've always advocated for less government. In fact, the government shouldn't be involved beyond policing, military, as far as protecting individual rights, the sovereignty of the country, and you know legislation with regard to issues like property rights, patent law, and then of course you need the courts. In other words, it's called mini-archyism. That's the smallest possible amount of government that you would need to maintain individual rights. Okay, and there are a lot of people that are dependent on the government, for handouts. And there are people out there talking about that they would riot if they don't get basically their food stamps, which is pretty pathetic. I mean, it's the attitude that they think the world owes them something. But this is what happens when you have a welfare state. You're paying people to be failures, and you're incentivizing that. And our government has no business doing that, and it's not just immoral, it's evil, right? You're taking money, resources from me to pay somebody to be a degenerate, and so that's been exposed. And when you have a large portion of the youth thinking that socialism is a good thing, to see people lose their minds and act in a pathetic way because they're not getting their freebies might be the wake-up call this country needs. They can look at this and say, this is what socialism produces, okay? And hopefully people will start to question this and say, all right, well, why did this shutdown happen? How does the system work? Well, it's taking money from people who produce something and giving it to people who don't. Of course, our media and on TikTok and everything else, they're going to focus on the people who are disabled and say, oh, feel sorry for these people. But there's going to be a lot of probably able-bodied people who are going to violate the rights of other people because they're not getting what they feel that they're entitled to get. And it needs to be exposed. It absolutely needs to be exposed. You're going to see, and I've already seen this before, I've seen private charities like churches, for example, that give out food, and I see very long lines at these places. And I don't live in an area that is, really that destitute. I mean, economically, it's one of the best areas of the country. And I say that as I'm in Florida. I'm not in Washington, D.C., where, it's ridiculous there, with all the money, being funneled to that city. But people are going to have to see this. And that's assuming that this shutdown goes past November. Schumer politically is such an idiot. He's being pressured by his donors to do this, I think. And I'm not saying the big corporation donors, but his constituents, the far left, the Soros types, to do this because they're trying to start a color revolution. They're trying to create so much chaos and have the Trump administration over respond to that and create their color revolution like they did in a lot of other countries. And I'm sure that there's probably elements of our CIA and deep state that's involved in this. It's not working. It's going to backfire. And for people like myself, this unfortunately is an opportunity. And I say unfortunately because I don't look forward to any kind of chaos. I would prefer that people learn, before, something destructive happens, something bad happens to them. I would prefer positive outcomes for everybody. But, we live in a world where that's not possible because so many people are just irrational. So I'm going to look at this as an opportunity to show people and teach people that This is what entitled people do. When entitled people that riot and violate the rights of other people and advocate for dishonesty and manipulation and the violation of rights of other people and irrationality, these are usually your ultra conformist types. People are very much into conformity. You think of the NPCs, okay? And that's not just NPCs, it's not just people on the left. People on the right have this problem too. Whenever people say you have to conform, they believe they're entitled to other people doing things for them. That's what it is at its core. But these monsters that are talking about rioting because they're not getting their food stamps. These are the people that are pushing to say, well, you have to conform to, the way they think things ought to be. In other words, keep giving them their handouts, and that people are not allowed to go out on their own and live for their own selfish purposes. When I say selfish, I mean selfish in the long run. That is, that they can't build their businesses. They can't, associate with the people that they want to associate with. So it's unfortunate, but in the long run, it may very well be necessary, for me to point out and show you what what that level, that type of entitlement and conformity to the system looks like.